Well, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the our TopLeft webinar for January. So my name is Matt. I'm with TopLeft, and this is going to be a recurring webinar that we're starting now because we decided we saw some need to offer just short training sessions on various topics. So that's what we're going to be. That's what we're going to be starting. The next one, I wanted to let you know also we are planning some kind of more detailed webinars for the next couple of months. So it'll probably be a few months before we do this sort of format again, because the next couple of months we'll have some really some detailed webinars, which we'll be announcing. But this is a sort of thing that we would like to do on a regular basis, and just offer a little bit of training, maybe 15 minutes, and then an update on the product and what's new in the product, and then just also offer a time to answer, ask questions, and give some answers. So let's start out with a little tech check here. If you can, just Zoom has a chat feature, so type in your name and your city where you're from, and also put in whether you're using ConnectWise or Autotask. So while you do that, I'll welcome some of you. And while you're doing that, I'll mention that we are recording, and we will post the recording on our YouTube channel later today. Also the slides, so you don't have to take any notes or anything. That'll all be available for you. So hope it ends up being valuable. So welcome Chris from Dallas using ConnectWise, Judy Baker from Seattle, Dave from Cedar Rapids on ConnectWise. Welcome. Got Ryan in Syracuse on Autotask. Welcome. Oh, here's somebody from far away. Sigrid from Norway. Welcome. Also on Autotask. Scott from Mount Vernon on ConnectWise. Not too far from us. We have Paul from St. Helens and also Longview, Washington on ConnectWise. Thanks everybody. We're glad to have you all here. And there's more as well. You can keep tossing those in there. So why don't we get into it? So here's the agenda. As you've seen when you signed up, we're going to talk about two types of Kanban boards. One type that everybody uses, and one type that some people use. We use it. We should probably, like at our MSP, we should probably use it more. Not everybody knows about it, so I think that'll be really interesting. Also, product improvements. It's been a little while since we've given an overall product update, so we have a number of things to mention there, and then just a totally open question and answer time. About the two types of Kanban boards, I'll probably if there's time, I'll take a couple of questions if there's time, I'll take a couple of questions before we get into the product improvements part. So you can toss your questions into the, you could do it in the chat, but it's probably a little easier for me if you put it in the actual question and answer section of Zoom. So yeah, you can toss your questions in there anytime. And I'll try to get to a couple of those questions about the Kanban board types even before we get to the final Q&A time. Okay. So, two types of Kanban boards. The first type is the one that everybody knows about. This is where you have columns that are pretty general, and they can track any workflow in any organization. So that's the generic stuff like backlog, a column for ready work, stuff that it needs to be started, stuff that's scheduled, waiting on stuff for waiting, usually waiting on client in an MSP, stuff that's in progress or started, and then finally a column for complete, which some of you have. So those, as you can see, those are pretty generic, and they work in almost any sort of workflow and in any organization. So that's the kind that everybody has. Even the bulk of the boards that we have are for things like that. So here we see that the card and it's not the column that represents the work to do. In this type of board, it's the card that represents the work to do. So that would be, generally speaking, the ticket or the task. And so what you need to have is a clear description of the work to do in the ticket. So that's typically either in the description text of the ticket or in the task list, if you're kind of more organized about it and using that feature of the PSA. But frequently, at least with what we see, there'll be the ticket description will have the work to do, or the statement of the problem if it comes straight from the customer. So yeah, you need to make sure that you have a good card that defines the work to do. So this kind of board is good for visualizing work that has a lot of variation. The tickets could be all kinds of things. So that would be from a help desk where you get the mixed sort of service tickets, especially where the users submit any sort of problem. The general board is probably going to be good for that. Also, tickets for projects that are unique projects, just one-off things that you're not going to repeat, as well as really complex projects, which tend to be one-off projects as well. But things where you have a significant number of tickets making up this project, so that you would want to be able to see all those different tickets as they go through those kind of generic statuses, ready, in progress, complete, and so on. So those are good uses for general boards. So as I was saying here, the columns represent the state of the work. They don't actually represent the progression towards delivering the value for whatever that card represents. So to kind of understand what I mean by that, consider that, say if we go back to, say here we have columns for, ready, scheduled, waiting, and progress. It's hard to say, as far as considering moving your work from the left to the right side of the board, meaning, it's starting out and it's not near being completed, and it goes to the left as it gets closer to being completed, and delivering that value to the customer. It's hard to tell whether scheduled or waiting, kind of what order they should be in, because a lot of tickets are going to skip one of those columns. And in fact, we would hope that all of the tickets would skip those columns. We prefer if they don't go to scheduled, and we definitely prefer if they don't go to waiting. What we like to see is just go backlog, ready, in progress, and complete. And so the fact that we like to see tickets skipping those, and there's not really an obvious ordering between scheduled and awaiting, which one is closer towards completed, and that kind of suggests that there's something about this kind of board that is not as close to indicating the value stream as some other, maybe there's other types of boards that can. So it's also not obvious. If you have these columns and you're looking at the cards that are in those columns, it's not obvious just by looking at the ticket or the card, what's the next step for that ticket. Generally, to see what's the next step for that ticket, you have to go into see the description of that work, which is going to be found in the ticket. So those are a couple of things that are ways that these general boards are maybe not as ideal. Sometimes it's the best we can do, because everybody has certain parts of their work where you have a big variety of work, and you need some place to put all the miscellaneous stuff. So we do need boards like this, but it could be that there's a better way to handle some of this stuff. And that brings me to the second type of board. So the second type of board is one where you have set up this board for a very specific workflow in your organization. So throughout this deck, I'm going to go use the example of the business technology reviews. So that's something that a lot of MSPs do, where you get together. Well, you do actually quite a bit of preparation in advance, but you meet with the customer where you are the IT expert, and you suggest, kind of review how they're doing, and you suggest improvements. to to how they can manage their IT, and you just demonstrate that you're the expert and you're taking care of them. So in those can be managed using a board like this, where we have stages of this of the BTR process, where first you identify that you need a BTR for this customer, because it's been 3 months or more since their last one, for example. So then you would get a card for that particular customer, and you drop that card in this column here, because you've identified that that customer needs this meeting. Then you can see that now it needs to, we need to schedule it. So the next stage there is scheduling that. Once you've scheduled it, it drops here. Then these are just examples. Actually, this is the example this is the board that we use in our MSP. So then we stage that. You're just kind of waiting for the time when it needs to be prepared. You prepare, you actually deliver it, and then you do some follow-up afterwards. So this is very, very different. Is very different from the generic boards, because obviously you can see that these columns only work for this exact workflow. It doesn't work for any other workflow in your organization, but it offers some advantages. So not everybody uses this type of board, which is why I'm bringing it up today, because I think it's useful. So here the cards are general. So like I mentioned, the actual cards, which you see in ConnectWise or Autotask, that represents the unit of work. So that could be, it depends on what the workflow is. So in the BTR process, that would be one particular customer. So the card or the ticket would represent the one customer. It could, depending on the workflow, it could be a particular user. Like if this workflow has to do with, for example, setting up a new user in some system somewhere, then that card would represent the user. If it's a particular type of project, then the card would represent that one project. So something interesting to note about this is that the requirements for the work to do are not defined in the ticket in this kind of board. In here, the requirements for the work to do are defined somewhere outside of the ticket. So that means that actually the ticket description can be totally blank, which is a disaster in the general type of board, because then there's no agreement on what needs to be done for that ticket. But yeah, in this kind of board, it's totally okay, because you still know what needs to be done. It's just defined outside of the ticket. Now, it could be in a project template, so you might end up with some certain tasks on that ticket, and that's fine. That's a good way to manage that. And then you could kind of say, the requirements are based on those tasks that are on the ticket, and that's totally fine. At our MSP, KTI, Kirchhoff Technologies, so that's kind of the parent company here of TopLeft, is we tend to manage that in our wiki. We have a Confluence wiki, and it has quite a number of SOPs, standard operating procedures. So we have lots of documents like that, and so that could be one place where we would do that. We define this. Basically, you look at all the stages, and we define what needs to be done for a ticket to move from here to here, and what needs to be done for it to move from here to here. And basically for every stage as you go along until the completion of that unit, all of those steps are defined somewhere. For us, it would be in the wiki. For you, maybe somewhere else. But the important part is that it's documented somewhere. So this is really good for visualizing stuff that you repeat over and over. So BTRs, we repeat the BTRs over and over, not just for individual customers, because they will have 2, 3, 4 of them a year, but we're doing the same overall process for different customers all at the same time. So we have, for our different customers, we have a number of them in progress at any one time, all in different stages of that, but we're doing the same thing over and over. So it could be good also for repeating projects, like a customer onboarding is a project that hopefully you're repeating on a regular schedule. It's also very good for a sales funnel. In fact, that's how I manage some of the sales stuff for TopLeft, is by having a board that has the very specific parts of our sales funnel. And so I can immediately see where all of our prospects are in this on this board. And then each opportunity obviously represents an individual prospect. So they are. A couple of notes about that is that You may know that Kanban came out of automobile manufacturing. Toyota in the 1950s. They're the ones that kind of started some of these ideas, and so it actually has a much is having come out of manufacturing. I wanted to note that this specialized Kanban board actually kind of matches up with that beginning in manufacturing a lot closer than the general one does, because if you manage, like suppose that you're managing a factory floor, you're going to lay out these workstations where you're building your widgets one after the other, and at each workstation, that somebody does some work on this widget until it's gotten closer to completion, and then it gets brought to the next workstation, or probably kind of a pull-based system. You have the next, the one that's further along come and get it from the previous workstation, and so you can see how the specialized kind of board actually matches that pattern a bit closer, because it allows you to see where each unit of work or widget is in your series of workstations, let's say, which are just the stages in that process. So that's something interesting to think about. That also, depending on what sort of workflow you're talking about and what sort of stages you have, you might actually find that a board like this can match an actual physical reality, like in your office. So one example is if you have a workflow for deploying new workstations for your customers, you might have a stage in that workflow, which is, is this box the computer has been imaged, it's ready to ship out. And so for each card that's in this column, you're going to have one box sitting in your hallway or at reception waiting for somebody to come and pick it up. So you might find that if you have 15 cards in this column, that's going to correspond to 15 boxes sitting at reception, and maybe your receptionist is getting is telling you, let's get these things moved on because you can't move around or whatever. So with the specialized boards, they might actually match a physical reality in your office. So here's some of the advantages. One is that you can really increase efficiency for a couple of reasons. One is just kind of as part of the nature of it, you're emphasizing the standard procedures and the automation. You're really, in fact, figuring out what the stages are in your workflow is an element of automation, or increasing the standardization of this of your workflow, because you're agreeing about what are the main stages of that value. You're agreeing on that with your colleagues. And it lends itself to writing out SOPs to say what needs to be done to move a unit from one stage to the next. You can also it can help with specialization of the workers, meaning you can have individual members on your team own certain columns. Not that you have to do that, but it's something that you can do. So as they get experienced with the very specific steps that you have to do for the cards in the one column, they get faster and faster at that. They improve their processes and so on. It offers improved visualization for certain things compared to the general boards, because for a couple of reasons. One, you can improve your visualization of the workload because the cards tend to be a consistent size. So compared to the general boards where you're going to have a variety of work, the cards are going to be a variety of sizes. So you're going to have some tickets that are 5 minutes and other tickets that are 4 hours. So you can't necessarily see a lot of how many hours of work is in a column. It's harder to see that just by glancing, but with the specialized boards, each card tends to be approximately the same size. So it's easier to get an idea of how much work you have there. Also, the visualization is improved because you can actually, because the columns represent the value stream, and things that are on the right side of the board are closer to being completed than the things on the left side of the board. If you are emphasizing having a pull-based system, then if you see on your board that you have a lot of cards on the right side of the board, and not so, which means that they are closer to being completed. So if you have a lot of cards on the right side of the board and not so many on the left side of the board, well, that means that your team should be focusing on the cards that are on the right side of the board. You don't want to be pushing work forward if it's going to overload stuff that's closer to being completed and get when you already have a lot of work there. What you want to do is focus on the stuff that's close to being completed, finish that stuff up, and then you'll have lots of room to work on the stuff that's not yet almost complete. You can push that stuff forward. Another improvement is the work in progress limits and the neglected work thresholds, which we have in the top left Kanban boards. So that means indicators that kind of warn you if you have too much work in this stage, and also the neglected work thresholds, which identify if cards have been, if some of these tickets have not changed, they haven't moved from one stage to the next in a certain period of time, or maybe they don't have a time entry on them in the last couple of days. So basically it points out cards that are getting stale, like no one's working on them. They're just sitting there for a while, and probably somebody should put some extra effort into understanding why that is and getting them moving forward. So in the specialized boards, you can have different settings for each stage, and so you can specialize those for whatever is appropriate for that exact stage in the in your workflow. So as an example, in our BTR form here, it could be that a ticket, one of these cards should only be, maybe we want to have a limit, say we want to make sure that the follow-up stage doesn't take more than 2 days. So if a card is sitting there for more than 2 days, then we want to highlight that. Whereas a card could sit in the scheduled stage for 3 weeks. That might be okay. So with this sort of board, you can set those differences so that you are you're getting warned at the appropriate time for wherever it is sitting in your workflow. So you might be thinking that you have some workflows in your organization that could benefit from this. So here's some ideas of questions you can ask to figure out if a certain workflow could benefit from this. So one is, could you ask users to complete a form that's just dedicated to this purpose? Not that you are going to do this, just could you? Would it even be possible? Now, that's sort of thinking like, if you have a workflow where one of your customers needs to provision a new user, they've hired somebody, they need to provision a new user in their Active Directory, and they need to get a phone extension for them and whatnot. So you might have a form that says, what's their name? What's their title? Who do they report to? And so on. So, if you get that sort of request over and over, you might have thought about making a form to ask for the appropriate information, which is good practice because it helps you make sure that you have all of the information before you begin, and you can just sit down and do the work and get it done. So if you can do something like that, then that's an indicator that maybe you can use a specialized board for that sort of workflow. Could you write an SOP for that workflow? If you can, then maybe it's you've begun to standardize it, and maybe you could display that in Kanban in a specialized board. Could you sell this as a product or service from an online store? Again, not that you're going to do this, just kind of could you? Because selling that sort of thing in an online store, you can't have an infinite variety of different options. It's going to be something that's at least well defined and something that you can repeat over and over. So you have limited variations in whatever it is you're doing there. So if you could conceivably sell it on an online store, then maybe you can have a specialized board for it. And finally, and this is kind of the key one, the most important one, is could you start this from a project template? So if the answer is yes to any of those, then maybe you can use a specialized board for it. And if you already have a library of project templates, then you have a head start because you can take a look at those, and that is a great place to start thinking about where you could implement some of this. So if you're ready to do more with specialized boards, here's a couple of places you can do some more reading. We have our blog post here. This is how we set out to build our BTR, or quarterly business review, QBR process. So we have quite a long blog post about some of the elements involved in laying out that sort of process. We also, this is also kind of known as value stream mapping, basically getting being very clear and understanding what are your workflows as far as like, what are the stages as we move it closer towards delivering the value to the customer. So here's a post about value stream mapping. So a couple of things to remember. The cards on the specialized boards, can also appear on the general boards. So if you want to make sure that you have one place in Kanban where you see all of your work, then you can still do that. You can have your specialized boards, which help you visualize where in the value stream all of your work is, but you can also have general boards that show everything, mixing in the general work and the detailed work and the specialized stuff. So your homework is review your workflows to see what might benefit from a specialized board. That's it. So as far as this bit of training goes, I do have a couple of questions here. One is, will we be making a recording? Yes, we will be making a recording. Here's another question: would the specialized Kanban board be pulling from a specialized ConnectWise board? Good question. It doesn't have to, but I would suggest that you seriously consider that. And the reasoning is because one thing that you are going to need to do to implement the specialized boards is you're going to have ticket statuses or task statuses that correspond to these stages of your of the workflow. So it would make sense to me, at least, to set up specialized ConnectWise boards to just have these statuses that are specialized for that particular workflow. So as far as I also don't want to suggest to make it too complicated, but that's kind of something that you would have to decide. What do you prefer to have more ConnectWise boards, because that is a little bit of complexity to manage, or would you rather have fewer ConnectWise boards, but would you have these statuses which may not be applicable to all of the workflows? Do you want to have those statuses on your core ConnectWise boards? So you're going to have to. That's something that you'll have to decide, because there's advantages and disadvantages to both. So do you want to have the statuses which are only useful for these specialized workflows? Do you want to have those on the general ConnectWise boards? Or do you want to be managing more ConnectWise boards? But then you can keep those specialized statuses just on the boards that they're applicable to. So that's a decision for you to make. But those are the things that I see are involved in that. I have another question. In the second option, can you use the ticket's status to move the card between columns? Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's the only way to do it. And that relates to the previous question too, is that each of these columns in a board like this is going to have one status for them. And so whether you drag a ticket from one column to the next here in Kanban, which then goes out to ConnectWise or Autotask and changes the status on that ticket, or if you make that change in ConnectWise or Autotask, then we see about that change and we would move the card right away between the columns there. So it doesn't matter where you make the change, it'll always be up to date. Okay, yeah, thanks for your questions. Okay, so now we'll just go over some of the product improvements. Probably won't take too long. The first one is we have rebranded. You may have noticed we were CW Kanban, but the CW in the name was making Autotask a little uncomfortable, and us too as well, and the Autotask customers. So we are pleased to make the change. And we had really we had been thinking about this for a while, because we knew that ever since we started thinking about, are there PSAs other than ConnectWise that we might want to support, we had thought about, okay, well, we know the name isn't going to be that great. And so we've been thinking about this for a long time, actually, and we settled on TopLeft. And yeah, we're happy with that, because that really represents for us that we're always going to be about helping MSPs. Well, actually, I should say there's two things about that. One is it doesn't have CW for ConnectWise in it anymore. And it also doesn't have Kanban in it anymore. And that is because we don't like obviously Kanban is our core product, but we don't know that that's going to be the case forever, or it might not be exclusively Kanban. I would think that Kanban would pretty much always be our core product, but it could be that we are there are other things that we can do to help MSPs work more efficiently. So that's really kind of how we what we feel for TopLeft in the future is there may be other tools that we could expand to in the future that would help MSPs keep control of their work and work more efficiently. So yeah, we're happy with this name. The top left actually comes from the idea that, when you're looking for new work in a Kanban board, you kind of go roughly to the top left of the side of the board, and that's where the new work is. And that red arrow pointing to the right is representing the fact that you want to see the work moving from left to right. Faster is better. So the other important stuff is we have Autotask support now. So I won't talk too much about that. We did a webinar in December, which discussed where we were at with that. And this page has the details. So we're continuing to work on that. The level of support for Autotask is not yet equivalent to the ConnectWise support. So until it is, we're going to be continuing to work on that. And stuff that's coming up next is being able to add like service calls and assign members to tickets, and also showing, improving our display for neglected work on the Autotask side. Things like when was the last time entry on a ticket, and if that was too long ago, highlighting that and whatnot. So those are the things that we're starting to work on again right now. Something that we added in around in October now was activity boards for ConnectWise. So now, in addition to making boards that show project and service tickets and boards that show sales opportunities, now you can have boards that show activities. So this is really useful for sales folks who manage a lot of their work at the activities, or administrative folks who do that, or executives, people who don't work necessarily out of the tickets or even out of opportunities, but they do work from activities. So this will be very useful for them. We have indicators now on the cards that show you information about when a ticket is scheduled. This is available in ConnectWise now, and the Autotask support will be coming soon. So now you can notice these outlines around the indicators here. These are showing who's assigned to this ticket. So as an example here, we have 4 members who are assigned to this ticket. 3 of them, the ones with these outlines, have assignments that are in the calendars somewhere. This fellow here is assigned to it, but there's no calendar entry for that, so there's no outline. So the blue means that this fellow is assigned, and the assignment is sometime in the future. It's like tomorrow or further beyond. The green means that the assignment is today. And the red means that the assignment is sometime in the past. So this allows you to get more information about your, about your scheduling right out of ConnectWise, or pardon me, right out of Kanban. So you can see if something is scheduled far out in the future, well, far being tomorrow or beyond, or if it's happening today, or if that assignment was in the past. The member probably should, if they did the work. As far as at the time that the calendar said to do it, then they didn't acknowledge that assignment, so they need to go in and acknowledge it. Or maybe the work didn't happen because they were, there's 100 reasons that the work wouldn't happen, but at least you can see that. Whether you're the engineer or whether you're a service manager, you can see that there and know that maybe that ticket needs some additional attention. So we have now also style profile rules that mimic some of those things. So this, again, is also for ConnectWise. We will be adding this out for Autotask as well when we support the style profiles. So if you haven't used that, that is a way to customize the appearance of the cards based on certain properties of the cards. So for example, you can have a rule that says, like, if a ticket has hours logged on it, then trigger some additional styling on that card. A common one is to change the background color to something else, or give it a border, for example. Those would be the common ones. So these are the new ones that we've added. Has hours logged. That's actually not related to the other kind of theme. Just is a way that you can say, if a ticket, maybe it got in, someone pulled it into in progress, and they did some work on it, and they entered their hours, and then for some reason it got bumped back to like a ready column. Well, generally, if a ticket has any hours logged on it, it shouldn't go back to a ready column. So this would be a way to identify that work, to say, this ticket is sitting in ready, but it actually has some hours logged on it, and so give it a different colored background. for example. Then these three are part of the same theme as the calendar indicators, where this one can identify if a card has no assignment that's in the calendar, so that one can identify you for it can identify cards for you that maybe are sitting in a scheduled column, but they don't actually have any calendar schedule entry. So this would identify that for you. This one is for, does it have a schedule assignment today? So you can give it some additional styling to highlight the fact that this is something that should happen today. And then again, a schedule assignment in the past. So that's something that you can add some highlight on. Basically, if you feel that this little red indicator is not enough, you can make the whole background red with that sort of rule there. And then this is a big one. A lot of people have been waiting for this, being able to dispatch work from Kanban. So again, this is for ConnectWise, but it's something that we're working on Autotask for very, very soon. So the idea here is that if you click this special menu here on the card, click Dispatch, you'll get a window that looks like this. And then you can very easily, just from Kanban, you can put this ticket into somebody's calendar. So you select the member you want to assign, the date, and and then what it will do is we'll go out to ConnectWise and we'll fetch that member's basically the calendar for the day. It'll be the same, whatever ConnectWise knows about it. So if you have set up integration between, your Outlook calendars, for example, and ConnectWise, then you'll see the Outlook entries as well, because ConnectWise will know about them. And then we will fill out the spots that are not free. So in this example, we have spots that are not free here at about 9 and about 1 o'clock. And then you just click where you want to put it. So this orange is what the user has clicked, and it's filled out. This starts at 10 a.m. It's a half an hour, and then you just click save. So it could really hardly be any easier to dispatch work from Kanban now. We'd love feedback on that. So if you're a customer, you should try that. Let us know how it works for you. So yeah, that is the updates for now. So if you're new to Kanban in your MSP and you want to see how it could work for you, go here. We will that will give you our calendar, so you can schedule a time for a demo that works well for you. If you are a customer and you want to know more about how to use some of this, or maybe talk about just Kanban techniques, maybe you want to talk about a specific specialized type of board that you've identified and you want some advice on that, we can do that. Go to this link and we'll schedule up some training with you. And if this is all interesting to you, like especially the specialized boards stuff, then send this to your colleagues. We're going to post this recording to our YouTube channel later today, and you should go there. And that's where we'll have a discussion. If there's anybody who wants to actually discuss this, just do it on that. Do it on some comments on your on the YouTube video when we post that. And yeah, we'd really appreciate that. We can all do that together there. And that brings me to the Q&A time. So let me see, what do we have? What do we have for questions now? This is the point where you would, yeah, dump any of your questions. Yeah, so to be clear, what we intend for this is just wide open Q&A time. This is not necessarily about the specialized types of boards, although we certainly welcome questions about that. It's not about the product updates necessarily, although we'd welcome questions for that too. This is wide open. Send us any questions you have at all. So I see one here. In ConnectWise, can you have one board per company and a swim lane for each project assigned to that company? Yeah, so what you can do right now is there is a way to filter the boards. Well, like once you've, yeah, so here's how you would do that. You would set up one Kanban board, and you would set it to the project swim lane. Actually, rather than explaining it like that, why don't I just show you what I mean? So here's an example from our demo environment. So here's a project swim lane board. So you can see that we have, and we're showing these tickets in there. Sort of, this is a general board, and we have swim lanes here by the project. So we see one for CRM implementation. We can see kind of what stage all of these individual tickets are at. Financial system implementation, we can see where they're all at, as well as all the other projects here. So these, at the moment, these are from a variety of different companies. In fact, we can see the company here, Future Message, Wild Eagle, and so on. So there's a couple of ways that we could do this. The quickest way here is under the filters menu. This allows you to apply some additional filters to what you see on the board right now, and company is one of them. So if I wanted to see only the projects for Wild Eagle, then I can just do that there. They may have just the one. Yeah, so just the one. So we only see one swim lane now. But if they had multiple projects, then we would see just the swim lanes for those projects. So that's the quick way to do it. And that's good for, if whatever your use case is, you're going through it project by project, or company by company, I mean, and you want to see the projects that they have on the go right now. It's also, you can use this feature also if you are, maybe you have a screen share with one customer at a time. So you could share your screen and filter it like this. So as you're discussing the customer's projects, then we're just seeing the ones from that particular company. And you can do that whether you're screen sharing online or you have them sitting beside you in the office. The other option is if you go in and actually define how the board is created, then like you can see here under the swim lanes, we're using the project swim lane. We do have a company filter here. So you can design a board that only ever shows tickets and projects for a certain company. So if you did this, you could select one company or you could select multiple companies. So if you did that, then everybody who ever looked at this board would only see they would only ever see the projects and the tickets for the one company. So if you did that, you might end up, you may have a need to make multiple boards like that. So these are the list of the boards here. You might need to have one board per company, but I'm not. Yeah, I think it would, in most cases, you would get a lot of benefit just by using this field to filter it one by one. I'll just review some of the other questions that have come in now. Someone asked, can I link a card to a ticket? If so, is there a link to the tasks outlined on the ticket? Okay, so there's two parts to that question. Yeah, so the card is always linked to the ticket or the opportunity or the project task or whatever that that this represents. So always when you click on the title here, we just open up the ConnectWise web interface to that ticket or opportunity or activity, whatever it is. So that is always an easy way to get back to ConnectWise or Autotask for that. The second part of that question is, do we show the tasks on there? So let me just be clear, because the terminology is different between ConnectWise and Autotask. So in ConnectWise, tickets can have a series of tasks, basically a checklist of things that need to be done for that ticket. In Autotask, tasks are essentially like elements of a project. So it's kind of a task in Autotask is equivalent to ConnectWise project tickets. So here we're talking about the individual elements that would be done for a single project, service or project ticket in ConnectWise. So at the moment, no, but that is getting pretty close to the top of our roadmap. We know that being able to see those tasks on the cards would be useful. Even just starting out as this ticket has 10 tasks and 2 of them are complete, for example. But we would also love to show actually the details of those and be able to check off the individual ones. So we are planning to do that coming up fairly soon, and also to do the equivalent thing on the Autotask side, because project tasks on the Autotask side, I believe, can have a checklist of things to do, and so we would do the equivalent functionality there on the Autotask side. So the answer is not at the moment, but we are planning to do that very soon. Okay, so let's look for some questions here. The is the KTI SOP wiki publicly available, or is it internal? No, this is just our stuff. Even if we shared it, it is very specific to us, so it wouldn't be it wouldn't be that useful. Like, do you want to know how we set up our Sophos UTMs? Probably not. You probably do it differently. But what is useful is that blog post, which I mentioned in the slides. That's like how, for example, how we set up our QBR process. So we have, as a blog post, we made that. It's kind of just teaching like what is the process that we did to go through that. And so that is generic, and you can use that to learn how you might do a QBR process or other similar processes as well. So that is there for you. And the slides, I will post them. I will post a link to the slides when I post the video as well. Yeah, so you don't worry about finding that link in the blog. It'll be available to you. Are there style profiles to include other ConnectWise properties like budget hours, SLA status, last updated? Well, let me show you where you would find that. So the documentation for what's available is here at portal.topleft.team. So I know that the answers to those questions are under the using TopLeft Kanban board section and under here, customizing the appearance of cards. So this is the documentation for all of the things that you can do. And here's an example of some of the styles that you can apply there. So here's the list. This is all of the things that you can match on. Now, speaking to the specifics of that question, budget hours. There is one that's related to budget. One is if there's no budget set. So this is actually one that we use to say, if a card has gotten to this point in the board, this particular column, then it must have a budget set. And if it doesn't, it gets a red outline, as I think the one that we use. So that, if you have a rule that you should have a budget set, then you can do that and identify those tickets that don't meet that. SLA status. There's some stuff related there. We have a way to I should show you an example of this actually. So here's an example of what you can do with SLAs. You can get a card that looks a little bit like this. So you can set the thresholds that look out into the future to warn you when an SLA is getting close to, you're getting close to missing it. So this one is highlighted in orange. So that would be when someone has set a threshold on that column to say, like, when maybe if the SLA is due in the next 2 days, then, 2 days or less, then we will show that in orange. So that's an example of that. And this is what happens when you've already missed it. It turns red there. We do a similar thing for the due dates as well. So you can say, if the ticket is due in the next 2 days, show the due date in orange. It can help attract your attention to that and make sure that you're prioritizing that appropriately. Same thing, it'll go red if you miss the due date. So we do have a customization that you can use for SLA. Essentially, what it will do is it'll trigger at the same time that this triggers, but it will allow you to make additional changes to the styling. So you could say, basically, it's for if you say this orange tag isn't quite enough for us. We want it to look really ugly, like we want to give it an orange background. When that threshold gets exceeded, then that is what you can do there. We have similar things like when a ticket was last updated. We can look at when was the last note added. So we can do sort of the same thing here. If a ticket is exceeded the threshold for when was the last note added or when was the last time entry added, then normally that will just tag those fields as red on the ticket or on the card. And but we do also have these style profiles that say, sort of the same idea. If it's tagged red on the ticket, we actually want it to be more red. We want it to be more noticeable. So give it a really awful red outline or something like that. Then that is what you would use for the either note age exceeded or time entry age exceeded. So those are things that I think are related to that question. Another question is, how quickly do the boards sync with the PSA? It's almost immediate, like within seconds. So at least that's when they tell us about the cards. So it changes to the tickets. So if you change a ticket in ConnectWise or Autotask, then pretty much immediately they notify us about that, and we get the update. Same thing as if you drag a card from one column to the next, we immediately go out and change the status of that ticket or task in ConnectWise. Now the boards run on by default, it's a 30-second refresh, so it could be up to 30 seconds before you actually see that change on the board automatically. But if you know that you've made a change, you can always just like hit F5 on your keyboard to refresh the page, and then you'll see it there. Are you going to add show only my tickets activities checkbox to the web UI? Yes, because so we have a feature where if you're using the embedded ConnectWise mode, you can check. So the embedded ConnectWise mode is where when you open up ConnectWise, you can have a custom tab or a custom menu entry, and actually within that custom tab or menu entry, you see Kanban. In fact, it has single sign-on there. If you are signed in to ConnectWise, you don't have to provide any authentication to Kanban. ConnectWise tells us who you are. So you just see the Kanban boards immediately. And that has a feature where you can check to see, say, just show me my tickets. But we don't have that in the just the web-based version. I think we're going to add something like that. I will certainly take that as we'll record that as some feedback. I'm not sure when we could do that, but that is something that has come up, and we can certainly consider that. Any plan to automatically change the ticket status to scheduled once you dispatch it? That's an interesting idea. So, yeah, we haven't thought about that, but that's an interesting idea. So one thing I'll show you is we can enter. Engineers can enter time in Kanban, and one thing you can do is change the ticket status when you enter time. So I wonder if when you dispatch it, you could also have a field here that would set you the new scheduled status, for example, which gives you flexibility to choose the status you want, but also just do it with one step there. Interesting idea. We'll definitely take note of that. Someone asked, are there any limitations of functionality if we are hosted with ConnectWise? So I'm understanding that is, you're saying you're using ConnectWise Cloud. There's no restrictions or limitations at all. In fact, there's full functionality available with ConnectWise Cloud, or if you're using the on-premise version. Someone says they've created a new BTR service board in ConnectWise. However, the new statuses don't show in TopLeft yet. Is there a way to force a refresh? Yeah, you send a message to our support desk, help@topleft.team, because it will happen eventually. There's certain now, just technically speaking, we always are refreshing the data out of your ConnectWise or Autotask, but certain things happen at different frequencies. So, like for example, the tickets. Ideally, when you change a ticket, ConnectWise or Autotask tells us about that immediately. But even if in case they don't, or for maybe there's a network error and we just missed that notification for some reason, we're always refreshing the ticket data and other data that changes more frequently. So we're kind of constantly refreshing that. Things that tend to not change so frequently, like the ConnectWise boards and statuses and whatnot, we refresh that at less frequent intervals. So that's why you might not see that sort of change immediately. If you want that, we're happy to do that. We can set that up manually. So just send us a message to help@topleft.team, and then when we are happy to do that. Or actually, let me show you one thing. Not everybody knows about this. We have a chat box here and at our website at topleft.team. Let's click that. We're happy to take simple tech support requests here as well. So if you, you've made some changes, and probably wait until you're kind of done making the changes, and then say, pop your message in here, say, hey folks, we've made some changes to our boards. We've made changes to our statuses and whatnot. Can you just fire off a sync job for us? And we'll be happy to do that. Let's see, what else do we have? There's a couple of questions here related to security for the boards. And basically restricting access to some of the boards based on who the member is. There could be a variety of ways that you might need to do this. So to describe what we have available right now is there's two license modes that we sell this. One is kind of for managers, but not many companies use that. We really recommend the team license mode, where everybody in your organization who has a ConnectWise or an Autotask license is able to log in and use Kanban. And so what you are paying for as far as the licenses go is the ability to show tickets that are assigned to a user. So everybody can log in, everybody can see the exact same stuff. But if you want to, you kind of need to buy the number of licenses for the number of people who are actually assigned to and working on tickets. So because we do it that way, and because most people don't have a lot of very specific security set up in their PSAs, Autotask and ConnectWise, I think almost basically every MSP that we've seen, if you have a ConnectWise license, then you can log in and you can see most of the stuff in the PSA. You can't necessarily change stuff, but there are very few MSPs that we've seen that set up restrictions in their PSAs so that someone in a certain department or a certain location can't see data from another one. So that's why we don't support a lot in terms of restrictions and access control in here, because people haven't locked down their PSAs very much, and so there's not a lot of need for to lock down the data in the PSA, or in Kanban, I mean. However, there is one specific case that we can support now. It is the ability to limit a board, to create groups of users here in Kanban, and then to restrict the board to be only available to be seen by members in that particular group. So that can be, there's a variety of use cases you could use that for. Let me point out where you see that. The documentation for that would be under, here it is, under section 2, using the Kanban boards, under using security groups for these Kanban boards. So this, to do this, you have to kind of go into a backend section of the application and make some changes there. But here are the instructions. And so what you can get from that is limiting people to be able to prevent people from seeing a board unless they're part of a certain group of users. Question about security. Does a web UI support YubiKey MFA, multifunction authentication, or multi-factor authentication? YubiKey, no, it does not. However, it does support time-based one-time passwords. So, Google Authenticator style. And we have that set up here, my account. When I get into our own Kanban boards, I use that. The instructions are, again, under here, two-factor authentication. So pretty standard. You get your app, you click under your account to set up two-factor for yourself, and you get the QR code on screen and you scan it. And you're good to go. We also have a mode where you can enforce that. So basically you can require your users to use that before they can view the boards. So I think that covers most of the questions. I will review. There are some questions that I haven't answered, mostly because they're kind of specific, or maybe because I need some more information to answer them effectively. But I will review those and send you an answer if I can. And I think that brings us to, yeah, pretty much we've answered everything. So let me just wrap up here. That was everything. Yeah. So thank you for attending. We appreciate your time. We will do this again. Again, maybe we'll do it again after we do a couple of webinars where we're actually going to go into the details of how do you use Kanban processes in an MSP. We're going to have one for service work, and then one for project work, or maybe project work and then service work. But they're coming up, so you should get an email about that. And if you'd like to see more about how we can help and how Kanban boards can help you, this is a link. Schedule your call there. And existing customers, if you want to talk more about any of this at all, use that link to put a time in my calendar. And once again, we will be posting these to the YouTube channel and also to the blog, so you'll get the link and the slides as well. So thank you very much. Hope you have a great day.